Good morning, Facebook Live family. We are Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Boston, coming to you today from cold 50 Dudley Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My name is Reverend Ed Tansey, and I, along with Rev G. Stewart, are privileged to be the co-founders and spiritual leaders of this wonderful community here at the center. We also learn and practice the science of mind philosophy, and that is the study of life and the nature of the laws of thought. I invite you to go to our website, cslboston.org, to find out more about our spiritual family, this magnificent philosophy called the science of mind, and see how our community can serve you. And if you are being spiritually fed by our message this morning, you can include us in your prosperity circulation or tithing practice with your tax-deductible contributions that you can make right online. So the 2019 Center for Spiritual Living's theme is Spirituality in Action. And February's theme is Seek the Common Good. And our talk topic this morning is oneness. Oneness. So during my portion of the talk today, there are going to be three questions that will be brought to mind, brought to light. Question one is, what does oneness mean? What does it do? And how do we benefit? All right, so our foundational course here at the center and throughout all centers for spiritual living, the foundational course to the science of mind philosophy is something that many of us study. And this is the first course that one would get involved in to really understand what this philosophy is about. And people take it for a deeper understanding because it explains the 10 principles of the science of mind. And interestingly enough, the first principle that is discussed in Beyond Limits, which is that foundational course, principle 1 is oneness. Out of the 10, that's the first one that is discussed. So I feel that this principle of oneness is really, it's an important concept to study, to learn, to investigate, and then to embody. There's the key. Embody. So oneness, what does it mean? In our cosmic reality, there is a presence in the universe, a presence that we don't see. It's God. It is that light vibrational energy that is called God. That is the creation of all that we see. It is the one source. It is all that there is. And from this infinite source, people, all life, all love, all harmony, all joy, all being, all physical forms or effects, all of creation, it's all connected, all connected. And all of the spiritual and physical laws that I've talked about in the last few weeks, they're all contained within this one presence. They're all contained in this one presence. So just a reminder, there are many, many, many different names and terms that are used in the different theories and cultures and religions to express this concept of God. But please keep in mind that they all have the same meaning, and they all denote that single principle of oneness. Now again, some of the terms that you might hear being used in the science of mind would be like infinite intelligence, creative energy, the thing itself, love, first cause, the absolute, the universal mind, the changeless, and I can go on, but I'll stop there with the names that we might call it. So it really behooves us. It behooves us to realize that each human being is a creation of God, made of the God substance. And this is everyone's essence, and each individual is a unique incarnation of the thing itself, of God. This incarnated spirit is everyone's essence. It's everyone's essence, no exceptions. It's your essence. It is my essence. It's the essence of every human being. And here's a good one. Even the human beings that push our buttons. I'm going to repeat that. Even the human beings that push our buttons. Even the ones we don't agree with. You know, and I have said this, you know, that this essence is so unique to each individual. And you know what? The essence can never, ever be lost, could never be damaged, could never be destroyed through any of one's external journey here in this vibration that we call life. Never. We are an expression of God right here, right where we are, and there's nothing or no one who could ever take that away from each and every one of us. God in me, as me, and is me. God in me, as me, and is me. I just like hearing that. I take that in and I get all warm inside me. You know, again, each and every one of us is that incarnation of the one Spirit. And because of that, we're all connected. We're all connected. All of life is inseparably one. There's a divine wholeness. There's a total interconnectedness of everything. Despite any occasional feelings that we might have of separateness. This oneness, again, is irrevocable and eternal. It's who I am. It's who each and every one of us are. We, all human beings, are one with God, one with each other. One with all life. One with all nature. Animate or inanimate. And what we do as religious scientists, or the ones who choose to really live the spiritual path, we learn about oneness. We study oneness. And then we go on and embody more and more of what it means. And as we embody it and live from that consciousness of oneness, our life is more available and open to the greatness of the divine flow that is always ours to experience. The magnificence, the magic, the bliss. It's all there for the receiving. It's all there for the receiving. And as the Dalai Lama has said, I quote, "We all seek to find happiness and to avoid suffering during this short life of ours." You know, as we live in this world at times, really, there are occurrences, you know, that promote that notion of them and us, or you and me. And we know it's really never them or us, because them or us are one with each other. And from the Science of Mind text, it states on page 127, when we know our oneness with God and law, what a great burden is removed. Any sense of opposition is removed from the consciousness which perceives unity. So when I look at my life, when I'm recognizing the miracles and the blessings of life, and when I'm in alignment with the divine, and I have embodied the oneness principle, I am living in and from a real positive and empowering consciousness. And which, as we know, people, that's what brings about what shows up and manifests in one's life. And again, from the Dalai Lama, I quote, how people treat their fellow human beings, and indeed the world around them, largely depends on how they conceive themselves. That's a good one. Right. So, what I think about myself, how I conceive myself, really comes out as who I am as I show up in the world. So if I'm living from that place, if I'm living from that consciousness of oneness, and I truly embody all of what that means, I'm going to treat humankind beautifully, with love, with compassion, with kindness and respect. All of the nature that the divine is how I'm going to show up in my outer world. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. So now, if I see someone that is coming across as being negative, limiting, or hurtful, and living from that place that is opposite of what the divine is, it kind of lets me know that they haven't embodied the principle of oneness, because if one embodies that principle, if we know what all of the divine is, and that that's our nature, and that God's nature and my nature are the same, and that each and every one of us, we uniquely express the divine, then you wouldn't be living a limited life. You wouldn't be living from lack, or from fear, or from worry, or from hate. Because I know that God is all there is. The divine is all there is. Whatever name you want to give it is all there is. God is the creator of all, the source of all, the doer of all. And then I realize that people are in separation, including myself, when one shows up not living from that oneness consciousness. The I am consciousness. And coming from that principle. To me, it's very obvious. You know, I figured this. How I show up and how I interact with the outer world and experience the outer world is like really, it's like a great barometer for me. It's a great barometer that's an indication of my connection with the divine and how much I deeply embody that principle of oneness. So, as stated in the Science of Mind text, page 239, I just love that Science of Mind text. As we recognize our oneness with infinite intelligence, we are set free from uncertainty and pain. Now, I don't know about you. But I like to be living without pain and a focus and a purpose. And so for me, it's really important to continue to embody more and more that principle of oneness. I really work at that, you know. So knowing all of the qualities from the divine, knowing the qualities of the divine, knowing them and living out those qualities, and knowing that uniquely expressing them as we show up in life, what does that do? It brings about peace. It brings about harmony and compassion and balance for all of humankind. And I quote this from the Dalai Lama. If we can cultivate a concern for others, keeping in mind the oneness of humanity, we can build a more compassionate world. I want to repeat that again. If we can cultivate a concern for others, keeping in mind the oneness of humanity, we can build a more compassionate world. So the more and more compassionate our world can be, the more and more that people will experience that blissful vibration of life right here, creating heaven on earth. You don't have to go anywhere. You can have your heaven right here on earth, depending where your consciousness is. So embodying this principle, as well as all of the other principles that we believe in as religious scientists, I'm going to tell you, it takes time, it takes study, understanding, and energy. But I know this, that the results of embodying all of them will be well worth your time, well worth what you invest. Because the better my life will be, the better all I come in contact will be, and the better humanity will be. And that goes for each and every one of us. So I believe we've discussed what oneness means, what it does, and how we benefit. And I'm going to close by this last science of mind quote on page 230. So that the one, because this just warmed my heart when I read this. Through the prism of God's love, oh, I love that. Through the prism of God's love, I recognize the oneness of God and man. I have perfect vision right now. I have perfect vision right now. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you, Reverend. So now it's time for me to say a few words about oneness. Are we ready to hear some words about oneness today?
Yes.
I always say that when we take different takes, we get different feelings and different ideas as to what it's, what it's going to look like when we talk about oneness. And when you hear it from someone else, it sometimes brings you into a different place, right?
Sure.
It opens our minds into greater ideas. So Rev Ed has talked about the meaning of oneness, what it does, and its benefits, which is a great thing. What I want to share today is I want to share oneness and humanity. Interesting concept. Oneness and humanity. In oneness there is no other. And doing our work to remain in oneness. Now Rev Ed talked about a few of those little pieces and ideas, but I want to go a little deeper on that. So what I want to start with is that, the book of the month that we're doing for February is actually the Dalai Lama's Beyond Religion for a Whole, W-H-O-L-E, world. A whole different idea than the old idea of the whole world. It's just a wholeness is what I like to really focus on, is that idea of wholeness. So in oneness, we are in wholeness, are we not?
Yes.
When we realize our oneness, we can be in wholeness. It sort of balances all of that out. So what he says is, everyone has his or her own separate identity. Because of this, it is of primary importance in any attempt to develop a genuinely universal approach to ethics to have a clear understanding of what unites us all, namely our common humanity. So he's talking about, for us to have this world that we desire, this ethical world that we desire, we need to recognize that one thing, and that is our common humanity, right? Because that is the thing that really helps us to build on that idea of oneness. So, he's spoken there of our separate identities, and I like to say it's how we individually identify ourselves. So we identify ourselves individually as ethnicity, culture, sometimes sexual orientation. It can be all kinds of different things, right? We all have identities that we carry, multiple identities that we identify with in the world, right? Individually. And yet, with all of these identities, ultimately, we are all part of the whole of humanity. Even though we all have our isms, right? I like to call them our isms, and those are those things that we call ourselves, and yet, ultimately, it is our humanity that unites us. Because when we realize our humanity, when I deepen into that humanity, I am deepening into that principle of oneness, am I not?
Yes.
When I can see humanity as more than just the ism, I can see more than, I can see the divinity in everyone, right? Because that's what this is about. That's what we actually practice a lot here, is seeing beyond the outer world. Because the outer world, what does it do to us? It makes us believe that separation exists, does it not?
Yes.
The news all of the different medias, all of the different things that are going on in the world are always constantly pulling us away from our oneness. So our job is to realize that. So it matters not what we individually accept ourselves as. It matters that we are recognizing that no matter what I call myself, that I am one with my brother and my sister and my family and my earthly realm. Right? Because if I can see the divine in everything, I can see a whole new idea of life. And I can claim something new for myself. Are we ready to do that?
Yes.
Do we want to do that?
Yes.
Yes. And that's the beauty of the Science of Mind principles, is that it really does help us to realize that. I think that's why Ernest Holmes made core concept 1 oneness. He got that. That from oneness, everything else unfolds. So the 10 core concepts all tie in back to oneness. Forgiveness, where does that tie back to? Oneness. Wholeness, where does it tie back to? Oneness. So all of these different things. Spiritual mind treatment, our form of prayer, scientific prayer, what does that tie back to? Oneness. So we're going back to that original core concept. You know, there's a running joke in Science of Mind, around Science of Mind ministers, and it's like, how do you say oneness 52 times differently in a year? Because you have like 52 Sundays in a year. How do you say oneness? And I think it's like, yes, it sounds overwhelming, and yet it's not. Because there's always a new way, a new take on it. There's always a new way of looking at it, you know. Like I'm looking at it differently today, in different ways. I'm bringing up new ways of looking at it. So when we say humanity, I have to see humanity as one. Do I not?
Yes.
If I want to experience oneness. And I have to see it even when there are those people who are appearing in extreme separation, right? Because that we do see in the world. I get into it myself.
And what do you mean by separation, extreme separation?
Extreme separation would be the things that we see in the world that we would call evil, which is what people like to, label it. And yet it's people who are experiencing extreme separation belief. They are separate from their divinity. They are separate from each other. They are in a place where their separation is so extreme that they can't recognize their oneness. And we see that in the world, do we not? Absolutely. And what is our place in that? Do I have to fix that individual?
No.
What do I need to do?
See the truth.
See the truth, and the truth begins where? Within me, within each one of us. Because that's how I can build a world that works for everyone, is by knowing my truth and in grounding myself in that truth, right? Because as I ground myself in that truth, then I can see the truth for someone else who may not be experiencing it, and I've opened a window or a portal of possibility, have I not? In consciousness. So we've expanded an idea. So, the Dalai Lama says that we come to this planet completely dependent. Would you agree with that? Babies can't take care of themselves. So there is a need for us to be cared for, hopefully in a compassionate and loving way. Not every child has experienced that, I understand. And yet, what does that build in us? It builds an interconnectedness, doesn't it? Because in that dependence, I have grown attached to another individual, and yet that other individual is really not other, right? Because we're one. So even though we have these bodies, we're still one. And that's the important thing to remember. So it's really about coming to that place where we can see the commonality. Would you agree? And in commonality, can there be other?
Yeah.
There can. And yet, if I want to remain in oneness, what do I have to do then? Transcend that.
Yes.
Exactly. We have to transcend that idea of the otherness. Right? It's easy to say, oh, that's those people over there. And I've been there and I've done that, right? I'm sure we've all been there at one point in our lives. And it happens all the time. So what do I need to do? Pull myself back into my oneness. So when we talk about this idea of other, I want to just bring up this quote, and this comes from the Ethics of a New Millennium by the Dalai Lama. Self and others can only really be understood in terms of relationship. We just spoke of that, didn't we? Relationship. We see that self-interest and others' interests are closely interrelated. Indeed, within this picture of dependently or originated reality, we see that there is no self-interest completely unrelated to others' interest. Due to the fundamental interconnectedness which lies at the heart of reality, your interest is also my interest. From this, it becomes clear that my interest and your interest are intimately connected. In a deep sense, they converge. That's a lot to take in. But when you think about it, it's so true. We are so interconnected. There are so often times that we see things beyond this image of separation. Because my interests and your interests are the same interests, because intimately in the one mind, everything comes from that. Everything that we experience here on this reality is coming from that one infinite intelligence. Whether it be from people who are living in separation, in belief, or people who are living in the oneness belief. Would you agree?
Yes.
And it's always touching our lives. Thank you. So the Dalai Lama is speaking to some really interesting things here. He's really talking about greater stuff. So self and others can only really be understood in terms of relationship. Would you agree? Because we're all relating to each other. And I am getting to know God as well as God is getting to know God better when I get to know you. Think about it. I'm always relating to the divine in everyone. Maybe in sometimes not such a positive way, and maybe in sometimes in a positive way, right? Because the humanity of us, which is, what is it, I used to love that Doreen would always say that, when we drop into the body, we forget who we are. Like, so when we're born into this body, we forget who we are. And who are we before we got here? Spirit, right? We were in the oneness realm. We dropped into this body and it's like, whoa, separation. I got skin and fingers and hands and what's all that about, right? So we get lost in that idea. So why is it important to understand that as we call our own personal good, we should be aware of the good of all? Why is that important? Because we're all one. Because it's all interconnected. And there is enough for everyone. We look at our world and we get this idea that there's not enough for everyone. And yet, the divine gives everything of itself, does it not? And I say this because the divine is who we are. And why would the divine deny itself anything? It individualized us so that it could know itself better. And I got a powerful quote at the end of this talk that I think really speaks to that. So I really can't wait to share that with you. But so it's that realization that there is this powerful interconnectedness. So Ernest Holmes reminds us of this in The Science of Mind when he talks about this infinite good and possibility. There is nothing in the universal order that denies the individual's good or self-expression, so long as such self-expression does not contradict the general good, does not contradict goodness itself. There is nothing in the universe that denies us the right to be happy if our happiness does not deny or interfere with the general good. So the universe remains unlimited, though the world has suffered a sense of limitation. So no matter what, there's infinite possibilities in the world, and we sometimes appear to be suffering from limitation in our lives, do we not?
Yes.
That is the appearance, but that is not the truth. we can always call for more. And how do we do that? How do we call for more? We use our consciousness. We use our spiritual mind treatment, our spiritual practice, our meditation, whatever it is that we're learning here and growing into, we're using every single day to create a greater world, not only for ourselves, but for all of humanity, right? That's how we do it. And it's the work that makes us get there. That's how we get there. You know, I see people, I've known people who have said, oh yeah, I read The Science of Mind, and I said, so why is your life not more fulfilling? Well, I read it. Okay. And do you practice it? Well, no. But it was a good book. And I thought, how many of us have read a good book, been inspired for a few moments, you know, and then we go back to our lives as usual? Anybody ever done that? We've all done that, right? And what's the latest new thing, right? I love that. It's like, what's the latest new thing? How about you try the thing you started with the first time or whatever it is, and work with that, and let that grow you into a bigger place of being. So that's the important thing. So the best way I have found to keep my good in alignment with the goodness of itself is to include it in my spiritual mind treatment practice, which is our form of scientific prayer, right? And this is what I do. Because sometimes you have an idea and it seems like the greatest idea you could ever come up with, and then you realize it's like, ooh, but that could cause difficulties for others, right? I may be asking for something that appears to be causing a difficult situation for someone else. So what I do is I add this or something better. Because what does that do? It not only opens me up to more good from the universe, but it also opens up the universe to provide my desire through the highest and best goodness of itself, right? So I've opened that possibility channel. Now I'm willing to bet you that when you do that sometimes, it does show up a little less than what we would like it to show up, and yet it is through our expansion and our personal growth that we actually expand into the greater good. Would you agree?
Yep.
So it is through the conflict sometimes that we can grow into a greater way of being. And that's what I'm all about. And I'm always doing that in my life. It seems like. It shows up, and it doesn't always... What is it that Reverend Ian always used to say? He said, you know, say yes and then heal into the yes. And I'll tell you, life feels that way sometimes, does it not? I say yes and then I heal into the yes. But it's okay. Because if I know that I am one with the divine, then even in that appearance of conflict or difficulty, or chemicalization, as Emily Cady used to call it, you know, that I can still grow into that greater way of being. I can do that and be that. So what I want to lastly say here is that, we talk about ways to remain in the oneness, right? Now we've already mentioned some of them, have we not? Spiritual mind treatment, our form of scientific prayer, affirmative prayer, that helps get us into alignment with our oneness. Another thing you can do is meditation, right? And many of our other spiritual practice, visioning does it, really? All of the different things that we practice here. So I decided to go online and check out, Chopra.com, which is the Chopra Center, and he came up with some helpful hints that I want to share with you today. He said that you can take this idea and you can go pay more attention to your inner world and how it interacts with your outer experiences. So pay close attention to your inner world and how it is interacting with your outer experience. Take that into meditation or into a spiritual practice, right? He also said, ask yourself when you hear noises, what thoughts arise in your head? Certain noises can make us think certain things, right? And so it's really learning about who we are, is it not? It's more of that. So when you see certain sights or people, what thoughts accompany those visuals? Thinking about those as some different thoughts. And when coming into contact with others, what thoughts come to mind about yourself or about the other person or other people? because those are another piece of us, right? And it helps me to think about how can I get into more alignment. The next thing he offered was notice coincidences in your life. You know, we sometimes talk around here about synchronicity, right? And life is synchronistic. There's always these interconnected moments that are constantly showing us how our lives are always being guided by this infinite hand to our highest good. And that's what it's about. That's the magic. In that synchronicity, I see my oneness. Do I know? It empowers me to recognize that. So, and then when you see these synchronicities, be grateful for them. A gratitude practice, which also deepens our sense of oneness, does it not? So these are all things that we can use to empower us. So if we see, my hope is that we can see humanity in a oneness after listening to this talk and this inspiration, that we can move into that place. If we see the other as outside of us, we can use some of these simple tools to bring us back to our natural state of oneness. Would you agree? Okay.
Yes.
So that's why we offer many tools in Science of Mind, because it's all about getting us back to that oneness, because it's really healing that sense of separation is all we're doing in all the different practices that we do. Healing that sense of separation. So when I'm in separation, can I have my good in consciousness? I can't. I have to be back into that oneness, knowing that I am one with the infinite. So by doing this, we join together in this work of creating a world that works for everyone and all of creation, which we know is the Centers for Spiritual Living's global vision. And wasn't it interesting that in our vision as an organization that the global vision is showing up here too? Because we're awakening ourselves to our spiritual magnificence here, so that we can express a world of oneness. And by doing so, what am I doing in the world? Am I shifting consciousness around me?
Yes.
Does each one of these individuals in this room go out into the world and not shift consciousness? Just by your very being. And that's the power. That's what we're doing here. And that's that interconnected oneness. So remember I said I had this really cool quote from you? I got it from the Science of Mind magazine. Eugene Holden, an amazing practitioner in this teaching. And I love when February comes because he usually does the daily guides in the Science of Mind magazine. He said this, and I love this. In the scripture, we read, God so loved the world that he gave his only son, right? So many of us are familiar with that one, right? He says, I believe this could have been written, God so loved the world that it turned upon itself, clothed itself, and named itself you. So let's say that again. It's powerful, isn't it? Changes the whole concept. And yet, really, when we realize that when they're in the scripture, when they're talking about the son, they're talking about all of our sonship, right? Because we're all masculine and feminine. We're all of these things. So he says it this way, and I love this. God so loved the world that it turned upon itself, clothed itself, and named itself you. Big. It's a big responsibility. Is anybody ready for that responsibility? I am. You know, I'm tired of living the secondary life. I want to live the number one life right now, in this moment. So when we remember that we are each individualized expressions of this one, I have to see the divinity in everything, no exceptions. Right? Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you for that beautiful message, Reverend Ramji. So we've come to the time of our service for treatment. And just get comfortable in your seat, whatever comfort feels to you. Let us take in 3 deep breaths of divine love, together as one. Let's breathe in love. Let truth about who we are. And with that last breath, I speak my word today, knowing the power in it. I speak my word knowing the power and the purpose that I am one with God, that I am one with this loving presence, this creative infinite force. As I am one with God, this is true for each one here. I speak my word knowing that I am, that we are one. Realizing this, with this realization, it is only God's consciousness that guides. God is truth. God is love. God is intuition. God is a guiding force. The light along the path. God is the way. It is God that guides and gives and creates and knows. God is in the breath of our being. God is in the beat of the heart. God is in the soul. God is in the substance that surrounds each one here. And God is big. God is real. God is truth. God is all love, all life, opulence, vitality, health, beauty. God is the essence of existence. And I know I am one. I am one with this infinite creative energy. I am one with this vital source of all that I need. I am one with this mirror. I am one with this opulent, abundant entity that is the essence of me. I am one with the clarity that God brings. I am one with the energy of the source of spirit. And I know as this is true for me, this is true for each one here. Each one here is the I am. Each one here is embodied with the power, the divinity, the truth, the light that guides. All is revealed. Each one here is one with a power that knows beyond explanation. Each one here is one with the spirit that is giving and loving and prosperous and hopeful and directive. Each one here is embodied with the intention to live big, to live full, to live as an expression of spirit, an expression of God. Each one here exists to live, move, breathe, and walk in your power, in the power of God, in the here and now. Each one here is fully equipped, perfect being, perfect man, with a consciousness that knows exactly what to do and when to do it, and how. And knowing this, I realize the power that exists in me and the power that exists in each one here. And I realize and know that this power is an interconnected truth, given the label of oneness. Oneness that is the essence of spirit. The essence of spirit, the God stuff. Each one here, through the energy in the body, is directed and guided. Each one here is given a path to fully be. And knowing this, there is no existence of separation. lack, worry, sickness, death. There's just infinite possibilities to be explored. There is a consciousness greater than all understanding that is built to evolve and to grow and to express and to learn. And the consciousness of each one here is ever evolving, knowing the truth of the being, the description of this human life. But knowing that this human appearance of life is small, realize it's important to let that go and live big with a consciousness so big and so great, the consciousness of God. And with this consciousness, the realization rings true in the heart, mind, soul, and spirit that all is possible. Health, wealth, vitality, opulence, interconnectedness, relationship, love, light, truth, guidance, intuitive knowing is all there in the essence, in the being, the center of the being of each one present in this room, in the world. This is the truth. And I am grateful for knowing the power that resides in me, the power of God. I am grateful for knowing and feeling that power in my brothers, in my sisters, in every sentient being that I see. I am grateful for realizing this truth, for the powerful being that doesn't know for themselves at that moment. I'm grateful for walking in the truth and the light of God, and I'm grateful for realizing and seeing this truth for each and every being that is encountered in this world. I'm grateful for the energy of truth, for spirit, and for the knowingness that all is possible. There's no limitation or lack. And I release these words, this prayer, into the action of divine spiritual law, knowing that just by the existence, the miraculous existence of my being and the being of each one here, seeing the perfection of the consciousness, how it exists, moves, and breathes in the body, seeing and knowing this is an instant manifestation, proof of the divine power that resides within. I release this word and these words knowing that each one here in this room lives, moves, and breathes and moves forward with a gratitude so great, grateful for the miraculous thing called life. And together we say, and so it is.
So it is. So let's join together in our affirmation. So let's read this together. I am one with all that there is. My thoughts, words, and actions are filled with harmony, love, beauty, warmth, and order. And that comes from Reverend C.C. Coltrane from CSL Greater Dayton. You want to read that again?
Yes.
Yes. I am one with all there is. My thoughts, words, and actions are filled with harmony, love, and beauty. Warmth, and beauty.
And so it is.
And so it is. Want to read it again and I'll do it wrong?
Thank you, Rev G. All right, so.